Alright, welcome to Intro to Python Lesson 3. Today we'll be covering conditionals, which includes ifs, elifs, and elses. And that's pretty much going to be the primary scope for today's lesson. So let's pop over to Replit. This is where we're continuing off. Last lesson, lesson 2, let me full screen this. We primarily covered while loops. I think we went over the syntax of that. Looks like we went over conversion of variable types, for example, string to int to string. So let's do a little quick review, nothing too crazy. Remember, we have to use string conversions if we want, an integer to be printed or to be concatenated. For example, here you're turning age or new age, which is an integer, into a string, so it can be printed. And for example, you need to convert the input to an integer, just in case. So you can do math with it, that's why. And while loops that we have down here, basically a while loop runs, it'll repeat while a condition is true. In this scenario, the condition is while age is less than 30. So if age is less than 30 is true, it'll run these two lines over and over again. And I think we went over the syntax for this, but I'll just go over it again just in case. Age plus equals 10 is the same as writing age equals age plus 10. And you can have like different variations of that plus equals syntax. You can have like times equals, you can have divided equals, you can have minus equals. But yeah, it's the same thing as like if I like times equals, that'd be the same as times equals would be the same as age equals age times 10. You're just doing that by what's already there by whatever number you're using. So age plus equals 10 is the same as age plus 10. And that's going into the age variable. So pretty simple. And now we're going to go over ifs, elifs, and elses. So I've actually made a new tab or a new replit. So I'm not continuing off this replit anymore. Don't worry, you can still use this replit if you want. I just do this because all of this runs and I don't want to have to deal with that. It's also nice to have conditionals as its own replit since it's kind of a pretty big and important lesson. So here's my new replit. I've got a lot of code on this, so don't be surprised and don't feel confused if you don't know what any of this does. I'm going to go over it, okay? So first I'm going to start off with ifs, elifs, and elses. Pretty much ifs first. So an if is a conditional. It basically is just kind of like a while loop, while a while loop repeats, an if loop is kind of like checking if something is true, and then if it is true, then does something. So there's no repetition. So let's just go through the code one line at a time. Here we're creating an input asking the user what their grade is, and they're storing that as an integer in the variable grade. And now we're checking if grade is greater than or equal to 90. And if so, it'll print you have an A. So, for example, if I were to enter a number like 99, obviously it would print out you have an A. And then it asks me this stuff. So don't worry about the what's your name. We'll get to that in a second. But let's just focus on this stuff first. Here, I'll do this to create like a line of separation. All right. So now you might be wondering, why the heck doesn't it print you have a B or print keep trying? Because this is where I'm going to get into elifs. Elifs are like another if, but they are only checked or only run if the preceding integer or preceding elif is false. So, for example, here, since I entered 99, this statement is true, right? This if statement is true. 99 is greater than 90, so it prints you have an A. And since that if statement is true, this does not need to run. Neither does this else statement, okay? Anything after that does not need to run. However, if I had it as an if instead of an elif, then this would run and it would print you have a B. So let's see that in action. So you see how when I enter 99, it prints you have an A and it prints you have a B, because this is no longer dependent off of this line, okay? Elifs are dependent on the preceding elif or if. For example, when I say preceding elif, I meant I mean, you can have as many elifs as you want. So if I have an elif that says like grade is greater than or equal to 70, right? You know, print you have a C, right? See, now this only runs, this elif, grade is greater than or equal to 70, only runs if this is false. Okay? So it's another if statement, but it's run and checked based off the preceding elif or if statement, if that makes sense. So it's kind of self-explanatory, but at the same time, it can be confusing if you think about what's the difference between an elif and an if, and does this run or does this not run, right? So that's why you need to be very careful with if you want your if statements to be elifs or ifs, because that can completely change your code, as seen in here, right? If we change it to an if, it would not be dependent on this previous statement, so it would, print I have a B too. And the reason for that, let me just get rid of this. The reason is because, for example, let me change this back to an if. If I have 99, grade 99, which is grade, is indeed above 90, so it'll print you have an A. That is true. And now it'll come down here. And again, this is not an elif, so it doesn't matter if this is true or false. It'll run either way. And grade is 99, and 99 is greater than 80, so it'll also print you have a B. Okay. Now that we've covered elifs, let's go to elses. Else in Python is kind of hard to explain, but it's the other possible possibilities that haven't been used. For example, you know how we've checked if grade is greater than 90 and if grade is greater than 80? Basically, with those two statements, we've checked all the numbers that are 80 and above, right? Because if it's anything that's at least 80 or greater, it would have printed something. So anything that's 79 and below is going to be a part of the else. So for example, if I enter my grade is 77, it'll print keep trying, because grade is not greater than or equal to 90, and it's not greater than or equal to 80. So it's part of the anything else numbers that are included in the else statement. It's kind of a weird explanation. Let me see if I can find like a official definition. Jeez, sorry, that's popping up. Okay, else Python. But that's pretty much the way I want to phrase it. Let's see. Yeah, anything which isn't caught by the preceding conditions. So, which is any, in this scenario, which is any number that is less than 80, basically. So, yeah. So, for example, this is why I have this "what's your name" stuff down here. This is a great example of else statements and what they do. So, let's continue off our current console run. It asks me, "What's my name?" And you can see in the code, if I enter Ethan, just like this, then it will print my name is Ethan too. However, if I enter anything other than Ethan, it'll print bummer. So let's see that in action. My name is not Ethan, my name is Marcus. So when I enter the word Marcus, it'll give me bummer, right? You can see how that works, right? Anything that is not Ethan, anything that has not been run through the previous statements, run as true through the previous statements, is considered to be part of the else. And just like elifs, elses only run if the preceding elif or if statement is false, right? So if I had another elif statement that said this, elif name is equal to Marcus, print whatever, right? Print like hi or something, right? So now if I enter Marcus or Ethan, then it'll be run here or it'll be run here. But if it's anything other than Ethan and Marcus, then it'll print bummer, because it has not been run true in the preceding conditionals. Alright, it's a lot to take in, but that's pretty much the gist of ifs, elifs, and elses. And I think it's great to see it in action. So let's kind of run the whole thing, and we can see how the flow of code works, because that's basically what conditionals are all about. It's about managing the flow of code. Alright, and from 0 to 100, this is the first part of the code, I will enter my number as 83. And you can see how it prints out you have a B, because let's follow the code, right? At 83, which is grade. Grade is 83. Grade is not greater or equal to 90, but 83 is greater or equal to than 80, so it'll print you have a B. And now we go to what's my name? My name is Marcus. and it'll print hi, right? If name is equal to Ethan, right? Marcus is not equal to Ethan, so it won't print my name is Ethan too. But however, I entered Marcus, and name equals Marcus, so name is the same as Marcus, so this is true, so it'll print hi. Alright, I just want to go over some important concepts when it comes to ifs, elves, and elses next. Okay, this you might have noticed this double equal sign, and you might be wondering what that is. I'm not entirely sure if I covered that last lesson, but I'm gonna cover it again just in case because it's very important. So let's come down here and let's look at equals equals, right? What's the difference between, let me see comments. What's the difference between equals and equals? What's the difference here? Well, for example, as you can see with establishing a variable, we use a single equals. And that's because with single equals, we use it to set something to something, right? We're setting, in this instance, we're setting grade to whatever the input is, right? We're actively changing grade to that value. However, when we're using double equals, such as name equals Ethan, we're checking, right? We're checking if it's true or false. We're seeing if the value that's stored inside of name, this value stored inside of that variable, is quote-unquote Ethan as a string, right? We're seeing if that is true or false, right? We're not trying to set name to Ethan, right? We don't want name to suddenly be equal to Ethan. We want to see if name is Ethan, right? And you can see how I brought up booleans like as a variable type, right? Bool equals true, bool, and if, right? If bool, if true. Bool, this is a boolean, right? This either gives a true or a false, right? And if it's false, then this won't run. But if it's true, then it'll run, right? It'll run whatever code is within the if statement. Now that brings me to another concept, and that's just another way to write it. For example, if I have a number, and let's say I have a boolean. Boolean. Wait, no, sorry. I was thinking that you had to actually just set the variable type. Sorry. So okay, let's say we have a variable. We'll call it var equals true. This is a boolean, right? Var is a boolean because it's equal to a true or a false value. Now, one way we can write this, instead of saying if var equals true, right? Blah 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 blah. We can instead, I'll just say blah blah blah. Just write a comment there, right? If var equals true, instead we can just say if var, right? Because up here, if the boolean equals true, var is the boolean. If it equals true, then you're kind of just saying if true, then do this, right? If false, it's just another way to word this. So really, when I have a boolean and I'm trying to test if that boolean is true or false using an if statement, if var is the same thing as if var equals true or equals false, right? Okay. And with that, and with if statements and elif statements, there's also, I think I'll cover this next lesson because if statements, elifs, and elses is a pretty big lesson in of its own. But there's also other commands like and or and not, right? But I'll cover that next lesson because that's a part of if statements and elif statements, but it's pretty substantial on its own. So that's just another way to write it, right? So that's just another way. That's just another way to write out something, right? If you wanted to check, for example, if var equals false, if I wrote it in this format, if var, this wouldn't run because you're saying if false, and since it's false, it won't run. Okay, this will not do anything. But if it was true, then obviously this whatever's inside of the if statement would run. This is just checking if var is equal to true. It's just another way to write it. Okay. Now, last part. How many minutes? 14 minutes. Okay, so this has already been a pretty lengthy lesson. So next lesson, expect kind of more additions onto if statements, elifs, and elses. So this is the last concept. Again, we might have covered this within last lesson when we came to while loops, but I want to emphasize the syntax of if statements. I'm going to look primarily down here in the highlighted section, so I'm kind of done with the grade portion. Let's look at this portion just for now. You can see how if statements follow like a pretty regular format for syntax. You have your if, your like first word, which is either going to be if, elif, or else, right? If, and then you're going to have your conditional, and then you're going to have your colon, and then you're going to need whatever you want underneath that if statement to be indented. Okay, this is very, very important, right? If I have, like, for example, a print command that says print hello, hello there, right? Okay, this, if I want this to be a part of the if statement, it needs to be indented. If I have another statement that I also want to be part of the if statement, it needs to be on the same indentation level as the preceding statement. All the statements in the if statement need to be on the same level of indentation. For example, this will give me an error, right? This will give me an error. This will give me an error. This will give me an error, right? Unless they are the same, like this, okay, it will not work. And when I mean conditional, I just mean like a conditional, right? It means you're checking if something is true or false. This is a conditional. Name equals Marcus, or grade is greater than or equal to 80, right? You're checking something. That's your conditional. You're trying to see if something is true or false. And then your colon, which is just signifying what happens next if it is true. So this indentation is very important. For example, when I have my print function like this will not give me an error, right? But this is telling the code that this print hello times 2, this print hello x2 is not a part of the if statement. So if this is false, this will run regardless, because this is the next line of code after the if statement. You can see in Replit how they have these kind of mini arrows on the side of any of your if, elif, or else statements, and that's because if you minimize it, then it'll minimize all the code that's within that if statement. So if you have an if statement that like has a lot of code within it, then you can minimize it within Replit, and then you can see what's not inside of the conditional if you wanted it to. So for example, if I wanted hello x2 to be printed only if this if statement is true, then I need to indent it so that it is within the if statement. Okay, this is very important. Indentation is super duper important. It's pretty much like the king of all syntax errors in Python. So please practice with indentation. It will help you so much in the future. Alright. Just to recap, okay, we went over if statements, right? We went over its syntax. We literally just did the indentation, the conditional, your little colon that you need to have. We went over elifs. We went over that they only run if the preceding if or elif statement is false. We went over else's, which is the values, the other possible values that haven't yet been considered true, right? And I think that's it. I think that'll be all for today's lesson. A very, very important lesson. Okay, conditionals are going to be very important. They determine what happens when, if you want something to happen, if you want a choice to be made, it's all going to be conditionals. This is the root of all of it, okay? Next lesson, what to expect, is you might be wondering, well, how can I have multiple conditionals? Or how can I have multiple conditionals but, one decision made, right? And that's where we're going to come into new keywords like and or. Not covering that right now, but that's what to expect for next lesson. Modifiers to your conditionals. That can make it more advanced. Alright, go ahead and have fun practicing.